The Triumph Trident 660 2025 is standing right in front of me, and it is coming into the new season with a couple of fresh arrows in its quiver. So stay tuned. Fittingly for the Holy Trinity, I'm here with Triumph's triple-cylinder entry-level machine, the Trident 660, which hit the market in 2020 and immediately became the most successful Triumph model of all time. So yeah, a true bestseller is standing here in front of me, and the secret to its success back in 2020 was that Triumph really packed it with everything that was state-of-the-art. In my eyes, the whole thing was, and still is, timeless, elegant, beautifully wrapped up, and not unimportant, it came with a super attractive price tag. For just over 7,200 euros, it was available in Germany at the time, and that was a serious statement. Because even back then you got ride modes, ABS, traction control, a small TFT display with LCD up front. All of that was new, LED lights, front and rear. It was a real hit for the mid-range or the so-called entry-level mid-range class, as it's often labeled. But over the past 5 seasons, a few bikes have entered the market that have challenged the Trident's position a bit. For 2025, Triumph is making a digital comeback with the Trident. What do I mean by that? First off, there's the new sport riding mode, which we already know from the Daytona 660. It lets you push a little harder. That means less traction control interference and a later ABS intervention. Then we've got cruise control and a quickshifter, both included as standard. Heated grips are also available as an option. All in all, Triumph's offering a really attractive overall package with the Trident 660. We're definitely up in the top tier of what's currently possible in the mid-range segment when it comes to electronics. And the price? It hasn't gone up all that much, about a 200 euro increase compared to the 2024 model. Sure, inflation and economic factors have pushed it significantly above the 7,295 euro mark it had back in the day, but still. Amelies been riding with me here, Gregor's taking over after me. So the three of us are going to take a closer look at the Trident 660 now. I'm kicking things off by talking a bit about everyday usability. So, what's it like to ride the Trident on longer tours as a full-grown man? How does it feel in daily life? You really notice it when riding on the highway. Your chest and your helmet are fully out in the wind. The Trident is built very narrow down below as well. So just like with most naked bikes, wind and weather protection are minimal. Totally expected, but still worth mentioning. One practical feature I really like using is the quickshifter, which comes as standard. And it works really nicely. At low revs it struggles a little more, but once you're in higher RPMs, it shifts smoothly and effortlessly. But now I want to talk about the killer feature for highway riding, the cruise control. Triumph has kept this super simple with one button operation. You press once to activate the system and press again to lock in your current speed. I tested it and it works from 3rd gear onwards, starting at 30 kilometers per hour. And that's just a genuine comfort boost. Of course, you can't micro adjust the speed like you can with other cruise control systems that have an extra toggle or thumb switch. It's super intuitive and really well implemented. Honestly, for the category of bike we're in here, this already puts the Trident a bit above the competition. After getting off the city highway, we headed down into Casteldefels. to do some errands, fill up the bikes and so on, you do end up having to head into the city. And the Trident is great for that too. It's small, light and super agile, easy to maneuver, especially for someone my size. One major safety feature that Triumph now includes as standard on the Trident for city traffic is cornering ABS and cornering traction control. Now you might be thinking, what's Pokorny on about? What's he doing? Why would you need that in the rough and tumble of urban riding? The simple truth is, city asphalt is usually dirtier and a lot more slippery, especially because of all the bus traffic. You really have to be careful, particularly in roundabouts. And that's exactly where the cornering traction control proves its worth. It actually happened to me once. I was entering a roundabout, thought, okay, let's give it a little throttle, and boom, the rear end started sliding out in second gear. But the traction control kicked in and saved the moment. This kind of thing also comes in super handy when you're riding over tram tracks or painted road markings. The only real drawback is the knee angle. It does get pretty tight over time. But for the usual 20 to 30 kilometers a day that most people ride, the Trident gets an absolutely solid report card from me. Out of the city and straight into the fun, the Trident 660 has now brought me to Olesa. By the way, I'll link the Kalimoto route for a ride down in the video description. If you're ever in the area, you absolutely have to ride this road. It's like a roller coaster with perfect asphalt and, thank God, relatively little traffic. So, a really strong recommendation from me. Now the question is, can the Trident really shine here? I'm a tall guy, as they say. 1.87 m tall, triple digits on the scale. And when the first Trident was launched, I already said back then that I'm pushing the limits of the suspension. Now Triumph has tightened things up again for 2025, and I have to say, it's still not quite enough for me. What makes things trickier is that the rear shock has adjustable preload, but the front fork doesn't. And the rear adjustment needs a C-spanner, which we didn't have with us. So I wasn't even able to fine-tune it properly for myself. What I can tell you is how it performs straight out of the box for someone my size. And up to, let's say, 90 to 95% of the bike's top speed potential, it handles itself really well. The suspension doesn't bottom out, it doesn't reach its limits. Even the brakes, they're solid and up to the task. But of course, as they say, the better is the enemy of the good. You do start to feel in some areas that a bit of cost cutting had to happen. The sport mode is new this year, and to be honest, I expected a bit more from it. It's still the case that the traction controls, especially when you roll on the throttle while leaned over, behaves very conservatively, even in sport mode. From my perspective, it kicks in too early and too hard. The tires definitely had more grip to give. It's a great safety feature, no doubt, and it's more than enough for beginners or anyone using the bike in everyday situations. But if you really want to wring out that last bit of performance and ride more aggressively, the only way to get there is by switching traction control off. Now, I didn't do that. I think that's the wrong move for public roads. But one last note about how the traction control behaves. You can feel that it's on the rougher side. There are other systems out there that manage it much more smoothly. Here you really notice how the power just gets cut off all at once. It chokes the engine and gives you nothing back. It's a different story with the ABS though, that I have to say. The ABS is on a really high level. It reacts in a very refined way. You really have to push the rear hard to provoke it. And that behavior is tuned differently depending on the selected ride mode. So what's my overall verdict on the Trident 660? This is a bike that, even for someone like me, an experienced rider looking for an easy, everyday machine, could be a genuinely appealing option. I could easily imagine this bike as a second motorcycle next to a big touring enduro. And in terms of price and what you get for it, Triumph has once again brought a really attractive and competitive motorcycle to the market with the 2025 updates.
There's honestly not much that stood out to me in a negative way. I do wish I had ridden the previous model. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance, but people say the throttle response on that one was pretty jerky. And yeah, you can still feel a tiny bit of that here. It's not completely smooth. Depending on how sensitive you are with the throttle hand, it can lead to a bit of a jerky ride now and then. Valentin also mentioned it's definitely improved, but it's still not perfect. Seat height is 805 millimeters, so not too high, not too low. Let me just sit on it real quick. Yeah, for me personally, it's spot on. I can easily get both feet flat on the ground, which is great for stop and go traffic or when you're waiting at a red light. And also in emergency situations where you need to react quickly, that kind of stability really helps. For those of you who love riding naked bikes but still want to carry a bit of luggage now and then, and this might not be the best option, the tail is super sleek and stylish, but because it's so narrow, there's just no practical way to strap anything on. So you'll have to settle for a backpack and make peace with that. I'm not really used to city riding like you have here in Barcelona. I come from a village with only about 350 people. Seriously small out there. The biggest thing you have to worry about is getting around a tractor. But yeah, the Trident handles city traffic really well. Then there's the question, how does it do on twisty country roads? And the answer is, it's super easy to handle, really light. That slightly rough throttle I mentioned earlier doesn't really bother me much here, way less noticeable than in the stop and go of city traffic. As for the power, there's definitely enough of it. But I still have in the back of my mind our last naked bike comparison where we also had the Speed Triple RS. And yeah, that one obviously has way more punch. So now and then I found myself rolling on the throttle and kind of wishing for just a little more oomph. But then I tried out the new sport mode and yeah, you do feel a bit more going on there. It becomes more responsive and lets you ride a bit more aggressively. It really is a lot of fun. When it comes to riding position, and there's a ton of freedom to move around while still being comfortable. I personally love being able to shift a bit from one side to the other when leaning into a corner. And at the same time, like, you've still got a really solid knee grip on the tank. Even when you're just riding straight and sitting normally, I really like the shape of the tank. The way I see it curves in and gives you space, it makes you feel like you're really part of the bike. That also makes it super easy to ride actively. You feel sporty, but without giving up that comfort you want for everyday riding. I had a great time, and honestly, I'd be happy to ride it again anytime.
We now come to the third chapter, sportiness. So it was up to me to push the Trident 660 into lean angles and hustle it quickly through the corners to really feel what it's made of. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't exactly on our side still. That didn't turn out to be such a disadvantage. Let's talk about it. Traction control was already a bit of a criticism in our past tests, and now, especially under these damp and cheerful conditions, I was able to really put the electronics to the test a bit more. And honestly, it remains more or less the same as before. I still think it's a little too conservative. The road mode is already very cautious, it intervenes very early, the engine starts to deliver its power around 6,000 RPM. But even before that, if you are leaning just a bit, the orange light already starts flashing. It's not even like you feel the traction control unless you're actively looking at the display, because it cuts in so early and so quickly that you don't actually get any real slip that the electronics would then catch. So most of the time, the only way you notice it's working is when you're opening the throttle but not getting any additional drive. Only once you bring the bike back out of lean does the power come back in and you feel the bike pulling again. That has both pros and cons. The big advantage is that the intervention cycles of this traction control system are really smooth. There's no disruption or wobble or anything like that. But on the downside, you are not supposed to be riding in such a way that the electronics are constantly intervening, even if the system is lean angle sensitive. And yes, it's great that it's there. Ideally, we as riders should be able to control the bike without relying on electronics all the time. And that's also not ideal when it comes to learning, because you don't really feel when traction control kicks in. In sport mode, it's a bit different. I went through the same corner multiple times, trying to open the throttle at the exact same point in second gear, sort of firing out of the radius. And the only thing that changes in sport mode is that it allows a bit more lean angle before the very subtle traction control starts working again. Only if you really throw the bike hard into a corner and then open the throttle a bit abruptly, then you might feel a hint of slip, like the rear starts to drift out just a little. But it's really minimal. So all in all, I'll stick with my opinion. Even in sport mode, I think it could allow just a bit more slip. We know this road, the grip here is really good, and there's definitely more that could be done, especially if you're someone who handles the throttle with some finesse. So yeah, it could afford to be a little more relaxed. Now let's talk about the next point, the suspension. And here's where I'll say it actually wasn't a disadvantage that we had slightly wet conditions, because even though the suspension isn't adjustable as such, it's still really well dialed in. It's a good compromise. The damping isn't too soft. You still get good feedback from the road. And on top of that, the riding position on the Trident is excellent. You lean forward slightly. There are cutouts here in the tank, and the handlebars aren't overly wide either. Altogether, it creates a very neutral handling feel. It's not a hyper-agile bike, and the bars and overall ergonomics don't necessarily scream, throw me into the corner, even though if you want to ride that way, you definitely can. But to me, it feels like the Trident invites a more neutral riding style, or even a bit of a gentle hang-off. And that's when you really feel how neutral the steering is. It turns in very smoothly without any weird tipping points where it suddenly drops into lean. No, it's super linear, and that makes it really easy to gradually approach the grip limit, especially because the suspension performs cleanly. So even here in wet conditions, I was still able to twist the throttle a bit, and I wasn't riding slowly either. And for this price class and the segment this bike is in, I've got to say, thumbs up. Suspension and handling are genuinely good. If I really had to nitpick just to find one small flaw, it would be the gearbox, or more precisely the quickshifter. It's great that it's standard, and yes, it generally works well, but first it requires a very clear and firm input with the foot. Other brands sometimes make that feel a bit easier, and at the same time it's a bit sensitive. If you only lightly touch it from below, which happened to me 2 or 3 times, it tends to slip into neutral a bit too easily. So with the Trident 660, you definitely have to shift with precision and commitment. And yeah, now and then there's a fairly strong jolt, a noticeable load change when shifting with the quickshifter, but that's nitpicking on a very high level. And finally, what else matters when it comes to sporty riding? The brakes. And here I'd say they suit the segment and the nature of the Trident 660 really well. Basically, they do their job reliably. You do need a bit more hand strength if you want to brake really hard, but they're always easy to modulate. Even though the bite point on the front brake is on the softer side, brake pressure builds up in a nice progressive way. So you never feel uncertain about trail braking hard into a corner, as they say. So my final verdict on the sportiness of the Trident 660, it's a very good, highly precise and neutrally steering naked bike that, with its 80 horsepower, can definitely be pushed enthusiastically through twisty roads. Of course, now it's your turn to let us know how you see the situation. Has Triumph updated their bestseller in just the right way to get it back to the very top of the middleweight class? That and other questions will be answered by how successful the Trident is on the market. Thank you for your attention, and a big thanks to the people behind the camera. And with that, I'd like to thank you once again for watching and say a warm adios from Spain.